Action figure reboots. Sponsored by Pearson Art.
Hello, and welcome back. Today we're looking at Mego Andorian. He was part of the second series of aliens that Mego produced for the Star Trek line. Released sometime in the mid 70s, I'm not really sure. I remember seeing these in the store back in the day, but because I didn't watch Star Trek at the time, I really didn't know how good or how bad this figure was. But I will say he looked pretty cool at the time. Years later, when I started watching Star Trek and I saw what an actual Andorian looked like, I was pretty impressed by the head sculpt. When it came to head sculpts, I think Mego really went above and beyond with their Star Trek line, and this one is no exception. So, the head sculpt is fine. The thing that always confused me was his suit. It seemed like they added much more than they really needed to. The head and the tunic with the diamonds on it, they're fine. In fact, if you look at it from this angle, it seems like they nailed it, but that's not really the case. They added some things that were kind of a head scratcher. The gloves, the belt, the boots. He didn't have those. This is the costume design, basically, that they used for the episode. Outside of the color of the tunic being wrong, the tunic and the head, they're fine. So for this reboot, I'm just going to use the head, the hands, and the tunic from this reproduction figure. I'm going to get rid of all the rest. But I would like to say something about the belt. This belt is really unusual, and this was even something that I noticed as a kid. They gave it to a character that didn't need a belt. I ended up using this one for my Romulan, and I think it looks great. But the strange thing about this belt is that the only character that this belt is perfect for is Plastic Man. No one else. I mean, it's perfect for Plastic Man. I don't know, just something that I always noticed. I mean, were there plans to make a Plastic Man back in the day? I don't know. I guess I'll never know. It just always seemed a little odd. But I digress. So, with that being said, let's begin. As I said earlier, the parts I'm using from this reproduction Andorian are the head, the hands, and the tunic. Let's start with the head. Since this was a brand new figure and it had never been opened before, I didn't have to do anything to the head. And here it is. I like these reproductions. It allows you to do things like this without having to depend all on vintage pieces. You could say that the details on these reproduction heads are a little bit softer, but I think they're just fine. All right, we have the head and the hands. Now we need the body. For that, I'm just going to go with this standard Type 1. For the bodysuit that's worn under the tunic, I thought this one was a little bit too thin. It's a reproduction, but the original one was a little bit thin too. So instead, I'm going to use one of the chainmail suits from the King Arthur set. I actually prefer these because they look a lot more like real chainmail. I have one of the suits. As you can see, the leg has been blown out, so I just turned it into a shirt. For the pants, I'm just going to use these standard black ones. I'm not really sure where I got them. I can't really remember. Just they're just black pants. For the boots, I'm just going to go with these. These are just Action Jackson combat boots. As I said before, I'm going to use this tunic, but there are a couple things that I'd like to address first. Because of the belt, the pleather material tends to get a little bit wrinkled, like this. To fix that, I turned it inside out and put a piece of cloth over it and ironed it, and I'm pretty happy with the results. It's also a little bit on the long side as well, so I'm going to cut it down a bit. Okay, we got all the parts. Let's put it together and see what we got. All right, I'm digging this. I think it's a lot more streamlined. I think the boots and pants look much better. I really like it without the belt. And the chainmail looks a lot better too. I also think the character looks a lot more formidable like this. I don't know. I think he just had too many accessories. I think this design looks a lot more tight. I know the tunic isn't the right color, and that doesn't really bother me. If everything else is on the nose, that's not really a big deal to me. I'm pretty happy with the way this came out. Now, I know that this isn't really much of a reboot. It seems like I took away more than I added. So, to make up for that, we're going to look at another figure that Mego did for the Star Trek line, and that would be the Gorn. Out of all the Star Trek aliens that they made, this one was probably the craziest one because this figure is supposed to represent this character. Can you spot the difference? I remember seeing these in the store and being a little confused. I was confused because I knew that the head that they used was from the lizard figure, a Spidey villain, but cast in brown and given a brown body and then using the Klingon suit. I knew that much, but I didn't know anything about a Gorn or what he looked like because I didn't watch the show. But looking back on it now, I kind of see where they were going with this. Obviously, the brown sleeves and the pants, they were meant to be the skin. That's why they made the head in brown. And the pleather part of the uniform, the chest piece, whatever you want to call it, was meant to represent whatever it is he's wearing. I really don't know what you'd call it, but I do get it. A different way to go might have been giving him this ape soldier suit. Maybe if they added a belt, that might have made it a little bit closer. Though I don't know. I think they might have been better off just coming up with their own original character, like they did with the Neptunian. Regardless, I'd really love to meet the guy that pitched this one in the office. On a certain level, it's kind of brilliant. But unfortunately, there's not much to reboot on this figure. But fortunately, I don't have to. When MC Toys made their reproduction Gorn figure, they made him more screen accurate. And I think they did a killer job. I'd like to add this figure to my collection, but I'd like to make a few changes first. The bodies that were produced during this period had a bit of a defect. The upper left leg didn't fit correctly into the pelvis, so the leg kind of juts out. You can't really see it on this figure because the suit kind of covers it. So to correct that, I'm going to replace their pelvis with this vintage one. The legs from these bodies actually fit perfect in these older ones, so that's taken care of. I would also like to rethink these cuffs or gauntlets, whatever you want to call them, because if you look at the character, he's not really wearing cuffs, but they're not really gloves. They're really neither. So if you wanted to go with the gauntlets, you could go with something like this, or you could go with something like this, depending on what you would want. But neither would be correct. So instead, I'm going to take a page from the animated series. He was in that too. And in the animated series, he didn't wear anything. And I kind of like that look. So I'm going to go with that. I guess that's about it. I know I said a few things, but I guess just those two. So once again, we have all the parts, or lack thereof. Let's put it together and see what we got. Okay, I'm really happy with this. I really like this figure a lot. I like the way that they sculpted the lower legs, so it was kind of like the bootlegs and the crew members. I think that came out really nice. And I really prefer him without the gloves or the gauntlets, whatever you want to call them. I don't know, maybe if he had the sharp nails or something, it might have been worth doing something more with them. But he doesn't have it. He just has the standard hands, so that's fine. I think it looks great. But what I really think is great about this figure is the material that they used for his suit. I don't know where they found it, but they really nailed it. And the head sculpt, I think, is great. All around good figure. The new Mego company actually makes a version of this character as well. I only went with this earlier version because I think the construction is a lot more old school. And I like the darker color a little bit better too. So I guess that about wraps it up for this episode. If you enjoyed this video, hit the like button, subscribe, share, comment. I'd love to hear from you. And until next time, ladies and gentlemen, always remember and never forget, think outside the box.